Nice to meet you all. From today, I'll be working here. My name is George, and I'm looking forward to collaborating with all of you. At 45, I had to change jobs. An accident injured my leg, making it hard for me to walk. In my previous job, I was active in field sales, but now that's impossible. When I decided to switch jobs, my boss tried to find something for me, but fieldwork was the main focus there. I didn't want to burden the company, so I moved on. I was married to my college sweetheart at 30, but we divorced 3 years later. I was too focused on work and neglected my family. When my wife brought up divorce, I was so shocked I couldn't eat for a while. It took time, but I've recovered and feel positive again. Since the divorce, I haven't had a girlfriend. Not because I'm not a ladies' man, but because I don't feel like being in a relationship. Because of the accident, I can't move quickly, so physically demanding jobs are out. That's why I shifted to this company, where desk work is the primary focus. I'm not very good with computers, so getting hired here feels like a miracle. My mentor here is Emily. She's 33 and a team leader, younger than me. She's known for her beauty and efficiency at work, but she's quite reserved. I didn't know how to interact with her, and it seemed she didn't like me. When I greeted her with a smile, she quickly handed me some documents and said, "Please get started on this." I'm not a quick learner and tend to make the same mistakes repeatedly. Whenever I messed up, Emily would say without looking up, "Please try not to create more work for others." Even when I apologized, she wouldn't respond. Some colleagues seemed to enjoy watching me get scolded. One of them was Mike. He's the same age as Emily and joined the company at the same time. Rumor has it Mike has a crush on Emily. He's good-looking with a refreshing demeanor and one of the top performers. But to be blunt, Mike is kind of a jerk. He's nice to the attractive employees but cold to others. I once overheard him rank female employees, saying things like, "I don't talk to women below an 8. Since I was having a hard time picking up on the work, he'd mocked me saying, "Maybe that's why your wife left you." George. Being new to the company, I couldn't outright deny it and could only manage a wry smile. Sometime later, my welcome party was held at the company. That day, I got to chat with colleagues I hadn't talked to before and had a great time. As the party was winding down, one of the colleagues suggested we should all go skiing or something next time. Immediately, that colleague glanced at my leg and awkwardly suggested an alternative. Actually, forget skiing. How about a food tour instead? While others agreed, saying, "Sounds good," I felt guilty for making everyone consider my condition. But then Mike chimed in, "You know, I actually have these special skiing invitations. I have enough for everyone. How about we all go?" The other coworkers replied, but looking at me with an uncomfortable expression. "Just go on without me. I'm not as young as the rest of you. Have a good time with the younger folks," I said. Suddenly, Mike burst out laughing. "What are you talking about? I never intended to invite you, George, in the first place. You just slow us down." It was clear Mike was heavily drunk, acting much worse than usual. Another coworker defended me, saying, "That's a bit too much, don't you think?" But Mike didn't care. Getting even more drunk, he mocked, "Being single at 45. Things must be tough for you." Then, placing his hand on Emily's shoulder, he said, "Poor Emily, maybe I should be the one training you." As I was pondering how to respond, Emily, who was nearby, rebuked, "Stop making baseless comments. I'm George's mentor here. And Mike, you've had too much. Maybe cool down in the restroom or something." Seeing Emily's calm demeanor, the room went silent. Mike was probably at a loss for words. On our way home, I thanked Emily. "Thank you for earlier." "No problem," she simply replied and said nothing more. During those days, I'd heard a rumor. Apparently, Emily had turned down Mike's advances. In fact, Mike had previously spoken well of Emily, but suddenly he began bad-mouthing her behind her back. She thinks she's all that just because she's pretty. I've heard she's leading multiple guys on. Women like her get too engrossed in their work and miss their chance to settle down. And so on. With Mike continuously putting down Emily, other coworkers would remark, "Man, he's such a small-minded guy." But Mike was oblivious to it all. A while later, Emily was handed a major business deal. She worked overtime daily, meticulously preparing the documents. I could see the fatigue in her eyes, and I'm sure she continued working even at home. Then, the night before the deal, as I was working late, I noticed Mike acting suspiciously near Emily's desk. What's he up to? When I approached him, he snapped, "What do you want?" Curious, I inquired about his actions, to which he replied with a smirk, "None of your business," and walked away. I had a bad feeling about this, and my suspicions were confirmed. Emily failed the business deal. Instead of the required documents, she ended up distributing unrelated papers to the client. Upon returning to the office, Emily was severely reprimanded by the boss. "What were you thinking?" "I'm truly sorry, but I had checked the contents of the envelope the day before, and everything was in order. The cover was the same, but the inside documents were switched," Emily replied. I was shocked. I thought maybe someone mistakenly placed it on my desk. Who would do such a thing? Who would create a document just to switch the inside? Think of a better excuse. Emily was visibly shaken and red-faced. It seemed that during the business meeting, the client said it was unacceptable and was very upset. Could it be? Recalling Mike's actions the previous night, it hit me. He did something to her documents. He set Emily up. I'm sure of it. When I glanced over at Mike, he was enjoying watching Emily being scolded with a smirk. I knew it. I was sure. During the lunch break, I approached Mike. "Can we talk for a sec?" "What do you want, old man?" I straight up asked him. "Did you switch Emily's documents?" Without hiding anything, he replied, "Yeah, so. I kind of want to give that woman a taste of her own medicine." "What are you thinking? Sabotaging her work just because you got rejected is messed up, right? Emily worked so hard for that day. Tell your boss the truth now. Shut up. Stay out of this, old man." With that, he bumped into me on purpose and walked away. That guy. I knew it. Realizing Mike was the culprit, I couldn't stay silent. I immediately told the truth to my boss, but the boss didn't even consider it. It was hard to believe that Mike, who was competent and had been with the company for many years, would set up a colleague. I wish I had recorded what Mike said that day. Emily looked so down. She had worked so hard every day, and it was unforgivable for her to be treated so terribly. I wanted to protect her by revealing the truth somehow. I was getting frustrated as I couldn't figure out how. One day, I overheard a colleague saying, "Emily might be transferred to the regional branch." I heard the directors talking about it earlier. It seemed Emily also heard about this. She murmured in a low voice, "It's over for me. Maybe I should just accept the transfer quietly." Made the representative of AB Trading Company so angry it can't be helped. I was surprised to hear that. "You just mentioned AB Trading Company." "Yes, you know it right. It's a big company." "Emily, don't give up yet. We can definitely do something about this." Will you trust me with this?" "Huh." Emily made a shocked expression at those words. Soon after, I made a call to a person. "Hello, long time no see. It's George. Sorry for calling suddenly. Co. Johnson, the company that Emily failed in the big deal with, was my former employer." I was surprised to hear the company name from her. I never mentioned my previous job, and I hadn't told anyone the company's name. I was so close to the CEO of my previous company, Mr. Johnson, that we occasionally went out for drinks. Co. Johnson is a young company CEO who is 3 years younger than me, and he is quite strict about his work. But he's a person who appreciates the hard work of his subordinates, and I respect him a lot. "Even if you don't get results, the process of your efforts is important," he always said. I didn't have any talent, but my only strength was my effort, and fortunately, Co. Johnson always appreciated me. In fact, there is a connection between me and the CEO. He has a young son, and I once saved him from a traffic accident. On my way to work one day, I saw a boy trying to cross the road in front of me, and a truck was coming towards him. However, the boy did not notice this and continued walking. "Watch out." With that shout, I pushed the boy out of danger. The boy was safe, but I ended up with a lingering injury in my leg. The boy I saved turned out to be the son of Coach Johnson. That day, Mr. Johnson had left his work phone at home, and since his son had the day off from school, he was on his way to deliver it to the office when the incident happened. I don't regret saving his son. I decided to leave the company partly because I couldn't do field sales anymore, but also because I felt my presence would make Mr. Johnson feel guilty and cause him pain. So I chose to distance myself from that company. Before I quit, Mr. Johnson told me, "If there's anything I can do for you, just let me know. I'll do whatever I can to help." I remembered him saying that. After hanging up with Mr. Johnson, I shared the news with my colleague, Emily. "The CEO himself is coming to talk to us." "Thank you." I had no idea the client was where you used to work, George. She was equally surprised. A few days later, Co. Johnson visited our office. Seeing me, he offered a smile, and I was also included in the meeting. "I'm really sorry for all the trouble," Emily apologized. In response to Emily's apologies, Co. Johnson calmly said, "Don't forget to check everything in advance. This is good manners as a member of society." "Yes, you're absolutely right. I'm deeply sorry," Emily continued to apologize. Mr. Johnson's expression softened. "I've heard about you from George. You prepared quite extensively for this project's negotiations. I'm eager to see the ideas you've come up with." "Yes, of course." After that, Emily presented the materials and started explaining to Mr. Johnson. And guess what? The deal was a success. Great project. It must have taken a lot of effort to research and compile this. We definitely like to collaborate with your company on this. Thank you so much. Emily was on the brink of tears with joy. Beforehand, our boss had told Co. Johnson about a colleague's harassment regarding this matter. Mr. Johnson had failed to investigate and just took his employee's word for it. High-ups were reprimanded for their behavior. Soon after, that colleague, Mike, was confronted and confessed his intentions to discredit Emily. He ended up getting demoted. On the other hand, Emily led the project to success, was recognized for her achievements, and got promoted from team leader to department head. I was genuinely happy for her, seeing her hard work pay off. One day, Emily approached me. "Thank you so much for everything, and I'm sorry for sometimes being presumptuous despite being younger," I responded to the apologetic Emily. "Don't worry about it. It never bothered me," Emily said. Then Emily added, "If you don't dislike me, I'd like to treat you to a meal sometime as a way of saying thanks." Surprised by the invitation, I blurted out, "Really? Are you sure?" Emily smiled and said, "Yes." It was the first time I saw her genuinely smile, and it gave me butterflies. Gradually, I got more used to the job and was trusted with significant tasks. I started going out with Emily for drinks occasionally, and we gradually deepened our friendship. I don't know what the future holds, but life is short. Hoping for more good times ahead, I continue to work diligently, facing my computer every day.
My wife and I are executives at a top company. Get out of here, you high school grad. The glitzy wedding venue reverberated with Mike's mocking voice. In a moment, the animated discussions that had occupied the room ceased. What a terrible guy he was to despise me, even in this setting. I had taken time out of my day to attend, and he treated me this way because I was at a loss for words. I made a choice after witnessing Mike's extremely impolite actions. Mike was about to meet a startling end. I'm Jack Smith, and I'm 35 years old. Let me briefly describe my turbulent life to date. My grandparents' home is where I was born and reared. After divorcing my dad, my mom returned to live with them, where she gave birth to me. Unfortunately, though, my mother's bad health caused her to die shortly after I was born. I didn't have parents because of this. That does not, however, imply that I was not content. I was lovingly and carefully reared by my grandparents. They brought me wherever I wanted to go and provided me pocket money so I wouldn't feel deprived. I never experienced unlove as a child because of them. I put a lot of effort into my studies because I wanted to make my grandparents pleased. They were happier and encouraged me more the harder I studied. I initially put a lot of effort into my studies for my grandparents' benefit, but as time went on, I developed a love for learning and was constantly in the top class. My homeroom instructor believed that I had a lot of promise because of this. Go to any school you like and pursue any career you want, my grandparents advised me, pleased with my academic achievements. Don't stress over the money. But they were growing too old to continue working indefinitely. Their lifestyles would have to become more economical if I attended college. I gave up on college because I didn't want to put any more strain on my cherished grandparents. People gave me a disbelieving look when I informed them I would be starting a job immediately after high school. But when I started working, I reminded myself that studying wasn't just for school. I was hired by a large chain of restaurants. I had no prior customer service experience, so I was initially at a loss. Susan, my boss, gently taught me everything from the beginning, even the right way to welcome customers. She covered all the fundamentals, including how to greet people appropriately and accept orders. Susan, who was married, stated that she loved me as much as she would have her own son because her eldest child was my age. She even offered me kind consolation when I had a client complaint regarding my service. Everyone initially faces difficulties. You will gradually recover, so don't worry. Her presence gave me a great deal of emotional comfort. I was always so tired when I got home. My grandparents were concerned about me as though I were their own issue after observing my condition. You've always overexerted yourself, Jack. You must improve your ability to take breaks. We have a new pillow for you. Hopefully, using it while you sleep can help you feel more rested. Hey, we purchased your preferred munchies. Together, let's take a seat and enjoy them. When I felt exhausted, my grandparents did everything they could to lift my spirits. Thanks to everyone's support, I gradually got used to the job, and here I am today. However, my peaceful life took a sudden turn when someone appeared. As usual, I went to work and was preparing for lunch service when a group of businessmen came into the restaurant where I worked. They were on their lunch break, and their particularly loud voices echoed throughout the entire place. They're pretty lively, aren't they? I thought to myself as I was getting ready to take their order. When I approached their table, I noticed one man in the group staring intensely at my face. I ignored it, took their order, and was about to leave the table when that man said something completely unexpected to me. Hey, you're Jack, right? It's me, Mike. Mike? No way. I was at a loss for words. Seeing that I was silent, Mike continued talking. Don't you remember? Back in middle school, we used to compete over our test scores. I never competed with Mike over test scores. That was something he did on his own, but I remembered Mike very well. There was no way I could forget because Mike was the worst. He used to treat me like I was poor just because I was raised by my grandparents. I remember you, I said. When I said that, Mike started laughing. So, I heard you didn't go to college. We used to compete over test scores, but in the end, you couldn't afford to go anywhere because you're poor. His colleagues joined in, laughing along with him. Well, people still stop at high school these days. Seriously, man. I wanted to get away from that table immediately, but of course, I couldn't just walk off. Even though I tried to keep my emotions from showing, it seemed they were written all over my face. Mike picked up on it and started mocking me again. What's the matter? Got something to say? No, you don't. A high school grad like you can't stand up to someone like me, a graduate of a prestigious university. He laughed loudly as if it was the funniest thing in the world. I brushed it off as best as I could and made a quick escape back to the kitchen. Susan, who had seen everything, looked at me with concern. Who is that guy? That was unbelievably rude, she said, furious. Her tone was sharp and angry. He's always been like that. He's used every possible way to look down on me just because I was raised by my grandparents. Even now, as an adult, he hasn't changed one bit from how he was in middle school. Hearing this, Susan's face twisted in anger. The truth is, Mike has always had it out for me, and I think I know why. It all started when we first entered middle school. Most of our classmates went to after-school tutoring programs and studied hard. Mike was one of them. He had been attending tutoring programs since he was little and was considered a top student, someone who stood out in class. Meanwhile, I couldn't bring myself to ask my grandparents to pay for tutoring, so I studied alone at the library. When I ended up taking the top spot in our grade, everyone was shocked. Jack, you almost got perfect scores in every subject. That's amazing, especially since you don't even go to tutoring, my classmates praised me. But in the corner of the classroom, Mike glared at me with frustration. From that moment on, his attitude toward me visibly worsened. Jack, what kind of trick did you use to cheat? Every time we had a test, Mike accused me of being a cheater. It was obvious he couldn't handle the fact that he couldn't beat me. Of course, I never cheated, but our classmates were probably too scared of Mike to stand up to him. I endured his harassment until we were finally placed in different classes. Later in middle school, I shared the story with Susan. Susan was so furious, she looked like she might breathe fire. So it's just jealousy because he couldn't be number one on the test? She asked. That's unacceptable. It's all in the past now, and I'm not planning to dig it back up, so it's fine. Susan let out a deep sigh at my words. While I could let go of being falsely accused of cheating, there was one thing I could never forgive. It happened at our middle school graduation. Since I didn't have parents, my grandparents attended the ceremony with me. None of my other classmates said anything, but Mike, in a loud and deliberate voice, mocked and belittled my grandparents for everyone to hear. You don't have parents? What poor-looking grandparents you have. I didn't care how much he insulted me, but I couldn't forgive him for speaking that way about my grandparents. Anger surged inside me just as I was about to shout at Mike. My grandparents, standing beside me, desperately stopped me. Let it go. Raising your voice will only waste your time, my grandfather said gently, holding my shoulder. My grandmother also rubbed my back to calm me down. After the graduation ceremony ended, we left the venue without interacting with any of my classmates. That incident made me hope I'd never have to see Mike again. But here he was, unexpectedly walking into the restaurant where I worked. Noticing my distress, Susan told me I didn't have to go back to the hall while Mike was still there. I didn't want to hear any more of Mike's snide remarks, so I decided to take Susan up on her kind offer and stayed away from the hall. I waited near the kitchen, hoping for Mike to leave soon. However, a few minutes later, I heard a loud voice coming from the register. Hey Jack, are you hiding because you're scared of me? It was Mike. His voice echoed across the restaurant, malicious and taunting. The other customers looked around, wondering what was going on. If this continued, it would definitely disturb the other guests. Reluctantly, I went to the register where Mike was. I'm not hiding, but could you please keep your voice down in the restaurant? I said, then started ringing up Mike's order. However, he didn't seem to like what I said and began getting angry. Whether I'm quiet or not isn't up to you. I'm spending money in this lousy restaurant, so don't you dare tell me what to do. I was stunned by his arrogance. Still, I reminded myself that he was a customer and held back, suppressing my emotions. Seeing me stay silent, Mike raised his voice even more. By the way, I heard a rumor you were unemployed after middle school. Are you mocking society? You should be like me, study hard, and get a job at a top-tier company. Then, maybe, just maybe, I'll bother to listen to what you have to say. He puffed out his chest, acting like he was the best. I couldn't understand how someone could live with such overconfidence. As I let out a big sigh, Susan stepped in and took over the register for me. Her expression was stiff with anger. I'll be back to eat here again, Mike said, as he and his group laughed their way out of the restaurant. The place fell silent, as if the storm had finally passed. I couldn't stop feeling irritated. Then Susan looked straight at me. That man is just the worst. Let's ignore him. He's a pitiful person without a shred of humanity, Susan said, starting to clean up the table where Mike had been sitting. She's right, I thought. Looking down on others, even as an adult, is truly the behavior of a terrible person. I decided to focus on the tasks in front of me and not let him bother me. I resolved to treat Mike as nothing more than a bad dream and forget about him. Soon enough, my peaceful days returned. I gradually forgot about Mike's visit and his condescending remarks. One sweltering summer day, I went to work as usual. The oppressive heat was draining everyone's energy. It's so hot today. I bet the restaurant will be packed with people looking for a cool place to eat, Susan said, then got busy with the preparations. Taking a cue from her, I got the restaurant ready as well. When the restaurant opened, just as Susan predicted, it quickly filled up with customers. Susan, the other staff, and I were all rushing around trying to keep up with the demand. Then, the door swung open with a bang. It's so hot, and it's way too crowded in here. Yeah, no kidding. Mike and his colleagues had walked in. There are plenty of other restaurants in this area besides ours, and yet, for some reason, Mike keeps coming to this one. Seeing him again felt like a recurring nightmare, and I started getting a headache. I decided to ignore him. The restaurant was too busy, and I didn't have time to deal with Mike's antics. But then Mike stood up and started walking toward me. I was stunned. What now? He finally stopped right in front of me. I avoided his gaze and focused on clearing a nearby table. But Mike, ignoring my efforts to stay out of his way, threw an outrageous demand at me. Hurry up and get us a table. We're busy people. Give us priority seating. He sounded irritable and entitled. However, many customers had arrived before Mike and his group and were patiently waiting for tables to open up, so such a selfish demand couldn't be accommodated. The waiting customers around him shot him puzzled and annoyed looks. I firmly raised my voice and said, "There are people who arrived before you and are waiting for a table. Please wait your turn like everyone else." Mike erupted in anger. "Are you seriously prioritizing these random strangers over me, your former classmate?" Mike's voice echoed throughout the restaurant. The customers who heard his extremely rude remarks looked visibly uncomfortable. Susan quickly rushed over to see what was going on. "Mike," I said, "your demands are nothing more than childish selfishness. Being classmates has nothing to do with it. Waiting your turn is just basic decency." When I said that, Mike let out a loud click of his tongue. Then he glared at me. "Decency? Don't talk to me about decency. You're just a high school graduate who didn't even go to college and used to be a deadbeat." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My academic background had nothing to do with Mike. I was completely fed up with his constant need to flaunt his education to assert superiority. Besides, anyone could see that Mike was the one lacking basic decency. This time, I couldn't stay quiet. My patience had reached its limit. "Your college degree doesn't matter here. Everyone else is waiting their turn, so you need to wait too." But Mike just laughed. "Just seat us already. We're busy people coming here on a break from work. These other customers are probably just wasting time. Anyway, prioritizing us top-tier business professionals is only logical." That's when I realized there was no reasoning with him. I couldn't fathom how someone could grow into such an arrogant and twisted person. As I stood speechless, Susan raised her voice. "Sir, if you cannot wait your turn, you're disrupting the other customers, and we'll have to ask you to leave." Mike's face turned bright red upon hearing Susan's words. His colleagues nudged him with their elbows. "Come on, Mike, let's just go. It's not worth it." But Mike, still fuming, turned his anger towards Susan. "Are you defying me? I'm not so pathetic that I'll take orders from someone like you. Just seat us already." The other customers in the restaurant stared at Mike, their disapproval evident. At this point, the scene was beyond salvaging. I felt that even though it went against my principles, seating him first might be the only way to end this commotion. But then, to my surprise, the waiting customers started speaking up. "Are you even a professional? Don't you feel ashamed for not being able to wait your turn? Yeah, do you think throwing a tantrum will get you seated faster? That's what a child would do." Mike seemed stunned, clearly not expecting such remarks from the other customers. Taking advantage of the silence, Susan and I escorted Mike and his colleagues out of the restaurant. When Susan and I apologized to the customers for the commotion, they smiled and said, "It must be tough dealing with someone like that." We managed to resolve the situation peacefully, but I hoped it would never happen again. If Mike comes back, I'll refuse to let him in. That's the decision I made at the time. However, since that incident, Mike never returned to the restaurant. Years passed, and before I knew it, I was 35 years old. Time flies so quickly. On this particular day, I'd taken time off work to attend a wedding. At this age, wedding invitations become more frequent. I found myself attending weddings of acquaintances almost every month. As for me, I had no plans to get married and wasn't even dating anyone. I often thought it might be time to consider marriage, but I used my busy work schedule as an excuse not to pursue a relationship. When I arrived at the wedding venue, I was struck by the grand entrance. I had attended many weddings before, but this one was special. To be honest, I hadn't wanted to attend, but I couldn't refuse the request of someone who had helped me a lot. After checking in at the reception, I walked inside and saw a crowd gathered. Curious, I peeked to see what was happening, and there stood Mike in a tuxedo. Yes, today I was attending Mike's wedding. Of course, I wasn't invited by him. I was attending on behalf of someone who couldn't make it. Knowing in advance that it was Mike's wedding, I hadn't been enthusiastic about coming, but I still showed up. When Mike saw me, his face was filled with shock. "Why are you at my wedding?" "I didn't invite you," he raised his voice at me. But I wasn't the same person who would back down from him anymore. I had learned something that made me realize I didn't need to fear Mike. "You're right, you didn't invite me. Then why are you here? I'll have you arrested for trespassing. Both my wife and I are executives at a top company. Get out of here, you high school dropout." Mike spoke with his usual arrogance. His condescending voice echoed through the glamorous wedding venue. The room, which had been filled with cheerful conversations, fell silent in an instant. At that moment, the bride, Sarah, appeared in a glamorous white wedding dress. She looked at me with suspicion, as if I were some kind of intruder. Mike, full of sarcasm, began introducing me without permission. "Oh, this guy, he's Jack, an old classmate of mine. Honestly, it's embarrassing to even call him that. He's just a high school grad who didn't go to college, and I heard he was unemployed for a while." Hearing this, Sarah laughed. "What? Someone like that is your friend?" "Of course not. He showed up uninvited," Mike said, looking at me and laughing loudly as if I'd crashed a wedding without being invited. I was genuinely irritated by Mike's ridiculous remarks. "Are you two really executives at a top company?" I spoke out emotionally. The two of them exchanged glances and started laughing. "Of course we are. Doubting us just shows how jealous you are. You're so rude." It was obvious who was being rude here. I couldn't hold back any longer. "Really? I don't remember promoting either of you." At that moment, a loud voice came from behind me. Everyone immediately turned their attention to the source of the voice. "Jack." It was James, the vice president of the company where Mike worked. James looked shocked to see me there, even trembling slightly. Mike, noticing this, spoke in a puzzled tone. "James, do you actually know this high school grad?" He had the nerve to doubt that we're executives at a top company. What a worthless guy. As soon as Mike finished speaking, James raised his voice. "Mike, how dare you speak so rudely? You have no idea who you're talking to." "What? He's just a high school grad." Mike clearly didn't understand the situation. Sarah looked equally confused. James then began explaining the truth. "How do you not know this? This man is the president of Johnson Group, which oversees not just our company, but 50 others." "What? That's impossible." "Yeah, there's no way he could be a president. Look at him." Their endless rudeness and unfiltered remarks left me utterly speechless. James, however, confronted them with yet another undeniable truth. "Jack is the son of Steve Johnson, the chairman of Johnson Group." The room buzzed with murmurs. "Johnson Group? That's the company that runs all those big-name businesses, isn't it? So Jack is way above Mike in status." Mike and Sarah stared at me in disbelief. I decided it was time to confirm the truth myself. James is right. I'm the president of Johnson Group. I took over from my father, the chairman. Mike still looked like he couldn't accept it. "You used to work at a restaurant. How could someone like that be a CEO? And your last name is completely different," Mike shouted, his voice trembling as cold sweat ran down his face. "That restaurant is part of the Johnson Group. I worked there to gain first-hand experience and observe how the business operates as part of my preparation to become the CEO. Also, after my mother's divorce, I took her last name. That's why my last name is different from my father's. It's perfectly normal." Mike's face turned pale in an instant. Sarah also fell completely silent. "Yes, the truth is that I am the CEO of Johnson Group, which oversees 50 companies. The reason I, a high school graduate, became a CEO has everything to do with my biological father. When I decided to enter the workforce with just a high school diploma, I struggled to find a job. My grandparents watched me with concern as I desperately searched for employment every day. It must have been hard for them to see me going through such a tough time. They contacted my biological father, whose contact information they had, and sought his help. My father came to my grandparents' house immediately. It was the first time I ever saw him. The moment he saw me, he hugged me tightly. That day we talked for hours, catching up on everything we had missed. He told me how he had wanted to send money for me, but was turned down by my grandparents. He also revealed that he had watched me from afar and had always hoped we could work together someday. "If you want, I'll pay for you to go to college," my father offered. However, I hadn't decided to join the workforce on a whim. My resolve hadn't changed. Seeing my determination, my father provided me with a job. That's how I started working at that restaurant. Only Susan knew my true identity, but she didn't treat me any differently, even knowing I was the future CEO. Instead, she taught me all about the restaurant business. It was during this time that I reunited with Mike. Later, when my father retired, I took over as CEO, and here I am today. As for this wedding, my father was the one originally invited. When he couldn't attend, I came in his place. When I saw the invitation, I discovered that Mike worked for a company under Johnson Group. Now, Mike and Sarah finally seemed to accept that I was, in fact, the CEO. I glanced at the two of them and asked James a question. "Is it true that these two are executives?" James straightened his posture and began explaining. "Well, actually, Sarah's father's company has a business relationship with ours, and one of the conditions for the partnership was to promote Sarah and Mike. So they were both recently promoted to department managers. But that was the first time I learned about this. Promoting executives under such conditions was absolutely unacceptable. I raised my voice at James. I do not approve of their promotions. Revoke them immediately. As soon as I said that, Sarah raised her voice at me. Jack, if you do that, my father will be furious. The deal will fall through. She framed it as concern for the company, but it was clear she was more upset about losing her position. Her selfishness was apparent. I couldn't help but laugh. Everyone in the room was now focused on me. We'll be fine without your company's business. If one deal could ruin us, we wouldn't have grown this big in the first place. Besides, I have no interest in working with a company that makes such ridiculous demands. When I said that, Mike staggered as if he was about to collapse. James wore an embarrassed expression, clearly uncomfortable. Sarah's father, who had rushed over after hearing the commotion, looked like he was on the verge of fainting. But I've been loyal to Johnson Group for so many years. My company exists because of Johnson Group. If we lose this deal, my company will be finished. He looked at me with pleading eyes. That's not my problem. If that's the case, you shouldn't have made such unreasonable demands, I replied. Sarah stood there in shock. Mike stared at me with wide eyes. So we're going back to being regular employees? Mike's weak words. Sarah let out a sigh. Mike, I've heard that you've been bullying your subordinates because you're a manager and you act arrogantly, even outside the company. To be honest, you two are a disgrace to our group. People like you don't deserve to be managers. When I said that, Mike snapped. Why should I let someone like you talk down to me? You're just riding on your father's coattails. A worthless high school graduate like you can't boss me around. I couldn't understand why he thought it was okay to shout at me, so I decided to hit him with one more truth to drive the point home. You haven't changed at all since the old days. Academic credentials have nothing to do with work. In fact, there are people with degrees who still commit fraud at their jobs. A heavy silence filled the room. Recently, the company's finances hadn't been adding up. I looked into it and discovered that funds were being withdrawn from your computer. Care to explain? I spoke as calmly as I could. Mike began trembling violently, clearly shaken. James widened his eyes in shock. Mike, is this true? Mike struggled to suppress his shaking voice and answered softly. Well, I borrowed a little to cover the wedding costs, but I was going to pay it back right away. I swear. Pay it back? You can't just take company money like it's yours. That's a crime. What were you thinking? James scolded him harshly. Mike shook. I'm so sorry, Jack. You'll forgive me, right? We're friends, aren't we? Friends. Mike and I? Not a chance. I couldn't help but laugh. The idea of Mike and I being friends was as impossible as the sky falling. True friends never look down on one another. Did you ever treat me with respect, Mike? Mike looked down, silent. He must have realized he had no defense left. We were never friends from the moment we met, and even if we were, what you've done is unforgivable. If you had sincerely apologized, I might have considered letting you stay as a regular employee. But that doesn't seem likely. As of today, you're fired. Fired. And my words were like a hammer. Mike collapsed to his knees on the spot. The once glamorous wedding venue was now shrouded in an uneasy atmosphere. Breaking the tense silence, Sarah suddenly shouted something no one had expected. I'm not marrying an unemployed man. This is all your fault. I'm calling off the wedding. Sarah let out a thunderous shout, leaving the guests in the venue visibly stunned. I did all of this for you. Don't say that. Mike looked utterly confused. But Sarah raised her voice even more. For me? Are you blaming me for everything? This is all because you couldn't treat Jack with kindness. Stop blaming others for your mistakes. The guests watched the scene unfold, holding their breath. In a fury, Sarah stormed out of the venue. Mike desperately tried to chase after her, but Sarah's pace was too quick, and he couldn't catch up. He collapsed to his knees at the entrance and began crying pathetically. The wedding was called off, and Mike and Sarah's marriage plans were canceled. Afterward, I fired Mike for his misuse of company funds. Mike kept making excuses until the very end, desperately trying to stay with the company, but I didn't pay him any attention. I knew if he returned, he would inevitably repeat the same behavior. Moreover, someone who evaluates people solely based on their academic background has no place in my company. On the other hand, Sarah couldn't bear being pointed at in the company as the woman who almost married someone who had been fired. She abruptly resigned, and now no one knows where she is or what she's doing. As for me, I continue to work hard as the CEO. Academic credentials don't determine a person's work worth. If you encounter someone who uses their education as a reason to boast, let them know they're mistaken. My tumultuous life has taken a turn for the better, and I'm moving forward one step at a time. I plan to keep walking steadily along this path, making progress each day.
I've longed for this day. Here I am, married to an older, overweight woman for money. Yet now, as we held each other close, I found myself enveloped by the warmth and softness of her skin. Unable to suppress the feelings welling up inside me, I released them onto her. My name is Mike Harrison. I'm a 23-year-old entry-level corporate employee. I graduated from college just a year ago. I've been doing reasonably well at my current job, and I haven't made any major mistakes. But there's one big problem. It's my scholarship repayment. My parents fell and were injured just before I went to college, so I had to go through college without their financial support. As a result, scholarship repayments weighed heavily on each month, approximately $300 a month. That's a substantial amount for someone like me who just started working and isn't making much money. My take-home salary is about $1,900. Rent is $500. Groceries are $200, plus utilities like water, and gas add up to around $100. After adding necessary expenses like my phone bill and clothes, my living expenses roughly amount to $1,100. Plus, considering the insurance I pay for, my parents, and the $300 for scholarship repayment, it easily amounts to $1,500. And that's after cutting corners by living in a cheap apartment, using a budget smartphone, and cooking my own meals. I could easily spend up to $1,700 if I'm not careful. I tried to save whatever is left over, but unexpected expenses came up occasionally, and my bank balance rarely increased. I couldn't afford the things I like, and falling ill would be disastrous. If it weren't for the $300 scholarship repayments, I could have some fun and peace of mind. I often found myself resenting the situation, but I made this choice, so I have to make the payments. It might be called a scholarship, but it's still a debt, so I can't quit my job and have no choice but to work hard. That day, I was gnawing on some cheap bread that was about to expire with a sigh. This made it 7 straight days of the same bread. I was starting to get sick of it, but I couldn't afford anything but cheap, filling food, so I had no choice. What's up, Mike? Eating bread again today. Probably because I let out a big sigh, someone slapped me on my back. Looking around, it was our CEO. The company I work for is usually the type where the CEO wants to go to the field site. It's a small company, and the boss knows all the employees' faces and names. You could say it's a homey kind of company. Ahaha, things are tight this month. Oh, is that a complaint about your wages being too low? No, that's not it. In my case, I have scholarship repayment. The boss seemed to understand and nodded, clearing up the misunderstanding. I was the only one who joined the company last year and this year, so I had no close peers or juniors. That's why occasionally the boss or my supervisor would come over to chat like this, and all I could do was give a wry smile because, in simple terms, I was saying I'm having a tough time because I'm in the middle of repaying a debt. Well, no one could help me with that. Then the boss started humming thoughtfully. Is something wrong? Well, I was planning to talk about it anyway. The boss awkwardly brought up a topic to me. Apparently, the boss's business associate, well, a chairman who has been taking care of us since long ago, was looking for a marriage partner for his daughter. The daughter is turning 40 this year. Honestly, even with matchmaking dates, she couldn't seem to find a partner. She really wanted to get married and even said, "If you marry me, I'll give you all my savings." So because of his reputation, The boss brought the issue up with me. To be honest, she's nearly twice my age. She's 40 this year, and I don't think children are on the table. That's why I wanted to just go through the motions of discussing it. The boss said there was no need for me to take it, of course. I had no intention of doing it. After all, I had never met this person, and I love kids, so I wanted to have children in the future. So I just thought of it as a performance for the sake of the CEO's reputation to show that I'd heard him out. I was supposed to have accepted it as that. At least, I thought so. What? Mom collapse. That night, I received a phone call. My mom, who had been sick, had collapsed and was admitted to the hospital. My dad's income had decreased due to the after effects of an injury, and there's almost no savings left at home. Without money to cover until the insurance came through, I impulsively transferred my meager savings to my parents. As it turned out, my mom's life wasn't in danger, but this incident put not only my scholarship but also my livelihood in jeopardy. What should I do? Looking at my nearly zero balance, I fell into despair. I should have consulted with a local authority if I thought clearly, but I wasn't thinking straight at the time, and before I knew it, I was contacting the boss. 2 days later, on my day off, I was invited to an upscale traditional restaurant. I never thought I would visit such a place in my lifetime, but today was the day to meet the chairman's daughter. So that's why I, a commoner, am here. It's formally a matchmaking date, but I had already decided to marry her. I didn't have money, and I needed money immediately to help my parents. If it's for that, marrying someone I don't even love was a small price to pay. She's a 40-year-old woman. I would just think of it as living with an aunt from my family. That's what I was thinking. Nice to meet you. I'm Jane Watson, she said. Pleased to meet you, I replied. The woman I decided to marry was absurdly, well, no offense, but she was obese. She must have been wearing nice clothes, but they seemed ready to burst at the seams, and fat was spilling out here and there. Honestly, I was taken aback. I wondered how one would have to eat or live to end up with such a figure. She was beyond belief, but I couldn't turn back now. I'm Mike Harrison. Nice to meet you. Let's drop the formalities. It's too formal, she said. It seemed that Jane had a strong personality, and I was incredibly anxious about whether I could handle this in the long run. In the end, everything proceeded smoothly, and we decided to live together. I was used to living alone, but my old renowned apartment was indeed too small for 2 people. Plus, she's the chairman's daughter. As expected, Jane took care of all the living expenses, and I ended up moving into a high-end apartment. The view was great. It was spacious. It was the best. I was a bit apprehensive about living with someone else, but we weren't close even if we were a couple. It seemed she didn't expect my love either, and she even said, "You can think of me as a family aunt, and we'll have separate bedrooms. Thank you for marrying me." The day after we finished moving, we submitted our marriage form. I started my own household, but it didn't feel real at all. Thanks to Jane, I didn't have to worry about money, and I could live in a nice house. But I decided to think of it as living in a shared house and take care of my own stuff. I've been quite reliant on Jane financially. I thought I should at least try to live independently. Good morning, Mike. Breakfast is ready. Surprisingly, Jane was quite a homely person. Her cooking skills were on par with an average person like me, and she seemed to really enjoy doing all the household chores. She did mess up sometimes, but it was nothing more than laughable. Her homemaking skills were hardly what you'd expect from a lady of her standing. Why is it so much fun when it's the same thing day after day? It seemed to me that she was doing so many things with a twinkle in her eye. What surprised me the most was her cooking. I had assumed the servings would be XXL-sized, but she never made more than enough to fill me up, and she didn't eat that much either. I'd initially thought she was a big eater, but that didn't seem to be the case. You know, my dad is overprotective of me. I think it's because my mom passed away early, but he has a maid do everything for me, so I can't do the things I want to. And he always serves me so much food. Since the maid went through the trouble of making it, I always try to eat it all. She told me one day while we were having a beer on our day off. It seemed that she had been brought up with an excessive amount of care, and it was a burden to her. I thought the only way to escape from my father's hold was to get married. But look at me, right? I couldn't find a partner, so I had no choice but to use money. I'm sorry to have saddled you with a woman like me. When the dust settles, you can divorce me if you want. Please just let me stay by your side for a while. Jane, looking quite apologetic, said this to me. Regardless of the situation, Jane was always calm, able to see things objectively, and I felt that, as a human being, she was a woman with a strong core. Perhaps her weight gain was also due to parental oppression. Jane has been prepared to be discarded by me someday. That's why. She's living this free lifestyle now, her eyes sparkling. The first feeling I had for her was sympathy. I was able to live freely because my parents were laissez-faire, but she didn't have that luxury. If being with me allows her to be free, even if just for a bit, I wanted to support her. Although in the current situation, I was the one being supported. But it would be a lie to say that I had no affection for her. Jane was what you might call an inclusive woman. She'd console me when I made a mistake at work or was feeling down. I felt a maternal presence from her. I guess I felt incredibly at ease. I wanted to be by her side, and before I knew it, I was in love with her. Seeing Jane trying new things, sometimes failing, sometimes succeeding, and being overjoyed. Jane, despite her appearance, was very beautiful. So much so that I didn't care about her physical appearance. And then 5 years passed. Jane and I hadn't divorced. Instead, we had become a very lively couple. When we walked around town, passers-by couldn't help but look our way. We stood out a lot, but such scenes had become a part of our daily life. Look at her, she's like a model. She's gorgeous. A group of high school girls giggled and chattered as they passed by us. Hearing their voices, Jane shrugged and said, "I'm a bit too old to be a model, don't you think?" Yes, the person the high school girls had complimented as a model was Jane. Now, Jane exuded a mature aura and beauty, elegantly wearing a tight skirt and high heels. Why did this happen? In short, living with me liberated her from stress, reduced her food intake, and household chores made her move around more. She naturally lost weight. Not only that, she even started going to the gym, saying, "I was worried about doing intense exercise before." And before we knew it, she acquired a truly beautiful figure. You wouldn't believe she was 45. In fact, I now look bare in comparison. Scenes like this reminded me once again of the horror of stress. But sometime later, Jane became bedridden. She stopped going to the gym and even struggled with meals. I was afraid, thinking she was sick, when I heard Jane's voice from the bedroom. We basically sleep in the same bedroom now, but when we want to be alone or are unwell, we use the beds in our separate rooms. Lately, Jane had been spending all her time in her own room. "Mike, I have something important to discuss with you." "Oh, okay." Jane's frail voice. She mentioned going to the hospital today. Could it be a serious illness? With shaking hands, I braced myself and entered her bedroom. I would try not to be surprised no matter what she told me. I was sure she was the one suffering. Entering the bedroom, I found Jane lying down, looking in pain. Seeing her slowly sitting up, I couldn't help but ask in a voice close to tears, "Are you okay?" Shoot, I didn't want to make her worry. Biting my lip, I regretted my words. Seeing my reaction, Jane said, I'm sorry to worry you. I went for a checkup today, had them look inside me. Then, she handed me a picture printed in black and white with a small circle marked on it. Inside the circled area, there was a small dot. Wait, is this? Yes, it's an echograph. I knew what Jane was trying to say. So this meant, I'm pregnant. What? Really? I let out a stunned exclamation. Of course, Jane and I had shared nights together, so there was a possibility. But I was sure the chance of a natural pregnancy at 45 was about 1%. The doctor said it was a miracle. Jane revealed with tears of joy welling up in her eyes. It turned out that all the recent discomfort she had been experiencing was morning sickness, and there was nothing else wrong with her health. I had given up on having a child, but knowing that our baby, is growing inside me, I'm so happy. I've been longing for this day, she admitted before breaking down in tears. I gently, very gently, held her in my arms. I could feel her warmth and hear her heartbeat, and I found myself tearing up too. Thank you, Jane. Truly, thank you. I am so happy right now. We two, both of us grown adults, wailed pitifully. Sure, there are risks associated with late-life pregnancy, and undoubtedly we're about to face all sorts of challenges. But none of that matters now. All we want is to share the joy of welcoming this new life. Our thoughts turn to the even happier future that's sure to come.